The Art of Letting People Go, a guide to releasing toxic attachments, people-pleasing, and emotional dependency introduction. Have you ever held on to someone long after they stopped being good for you? Have you smiled through pain, said yes when every part of you screamed no, and convinced yourself that keeping the peace was worth losing yourself? Have you ever looked in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back? Someone who has been so busy taking care of everyone else that they forgot to take care of themselves? If that sounds familiar, you are not alone. Millions of people walk through life carrying invisible chains. Chains made not of metal, but of guilt, fear, and the desperate need to be needed. They stay in relationships that drain them. They shrink themselves to fit into spaces that were never meant for them. They give and give and give until there is nothing left. And then they give some more. But here's the truth that nobody tells you. Holding on is not loyalty. Holding on is not love. Sometimes holding on is simply fear wearing the mask of devotion. And the moment you learn to tell the difference, the moment you understand what it truly means to let go, everything changes. Today, we are exploring one of the most powerful and most misunderstood life skills you will ever develop. The art of letting people go. This is not a guide about becoming cold, heartless, or indifferent. It is a guide about becoming free. Free from toxic attachments that keep you small. Free from people-pleasing patterns that steal your identity. Free from emotional dependency that leaves you at the mercy of someone else's moods, choices, and decisions. In this audiobook summary, you will discover why you hold on even when it hurts, how to recognize the toxic patterns that are silently destroying your peace, and the step-by-step inner work required to release what no longer serves you, without guilt, without shame, and without losing yourself in the process. Get ready, because what you are about to hear will not just change how you see your relationships, it will change how you see yourself. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Why We Hold On, the Psychology of Attachment. Before you can learn to let go, you must first understand why letting go feels so impossibly hard. Why does the mind cling to people and situations that cause pain? Why does the heart keep reaching for someone who has proven, again and again, that they are not safe to reach for? The answer lies deep within the human brain. We are wired for connection. From the moment we are born, our survival depends on attachment. As infants, we learn that closeness means safety and separation means danger. These early lessons do not simply disappear when we grow up. They become the invisible blueprints that govern every relationship we form for the rest of our lives. Psychologists call this attachment theory, and what it reveals about human behavior is both fascinating and heartbreaking. People who experienced inconsistent love in childhood, parents who were sometimes warm and sometimes cold, sometimes present and sometimes absent, often develop what is called an anxious attachment style. They learn at a deeply subconscious level that love is uncertain, that it can be taken away at any moment, and so they cling. They overgive. They people-please. They make themselves indispensable because somewhere inside them, a frightened child still believes that if they are not useful enough, lovable enough, or accommodating enough, they will be abandoned. Here is something most people miss. The pain of holding on is not just about the person you are holding on to. It is about the version of yourself you are afraid to face without them. When you define your worth through someone else's presence, when their approval becomes your oxygen, losing them feels like losing yourself. And that is the real terror. Not the loss of them, the loss of you. This is why logic alone never works when it comes to letting go. You already know the relationship is harmful. You already know the friendship is one-sided. You already know this person does not treat you the way you deserve. But knowing is not enough. Because the part of you that is holding on is not the rational mind, it is the emotional body. The wounded inner self that still believes it needs this person to feel complete. Understanding this is the first act of compassion you can offer yourself. You are not weak for holding on, you are human. Your brain is doing exactly what it was programmed to do. Seeking safety through familiarity, even when that familiarity is painful. The problem is not that you feel this way. The problem is when you allow these old programs to keep running without ever questioning them. Ask yourself honestly, who taught you that love means sacrifice at the expense of your own well-being? Who showed you that keeping someone else comfortable was more important than honoring your own needs? Who made you believe that your value was conditional, that you had to earn your place in someone's life rather than simply deserve it? These are not comfortable questions, but they are necessary ones, because until you trace the roots of your attachment patterns, you will keep recreating the same dynamics in different relationships. Different faces, different names, but the same pain, the same cycle, the same feeling of never quite being enough. The journey of letting go begins not with the other person. It begins with you, with the willingness to look honestly at the patterns you have been living and ask yourself, is this serving me? Is this the life I truly want? Or is this simply the life I was conditioned to accept? Begin here. Begin with awareness, because you cannot change what you refuse to see. Chapter 2. The Many Faces of Toxic Attachment. Recognizing what is keeping you stuck. Not all toxic attachments look the same. Some are obvious, either the explosive relationship, the manipulative friend, the controlling partner whose name alone makes your stomach tighten. But many toxic attachments are far more subtle. So subtle, in fact, that you may have spent years calling them love. Toxic attachment does not always announce itself with cruelty. Sometimes it whispers. It looks like someone who needs you desperately and makes you feel guilty for having boundaries. It looks like a friendship where you always show up, but somehow they are never quite available when you need them. It looks like a family member whose approval you have been chasing your entire life without ever quite reaching it. It looks like a relationship where the good moments are so good that you keep tolerating the bad ones, because the hope of returning to those good moments keeps you anchored in place. Here is the truth about toxic attachment. It almost always involves a trauma bond. A trauma bond forms when moments of intense pain and intense connection alternate in an unpredictable pattern. Your nervous system becomes addicted to the cycle, the tension, the rupture, the reconciliation, the relief. It feels like love because it is deeply emotional. But it is not love. It is chemistry. It is cortisol and dopamine locked in a destructive dance. Let us look at the most common faces of toxic attachment so you can begin to recognize them in your own life. The first face is the rescuer dynamic. This is where you have unconsciously taken on the role of saving someone. Their chaos becomes your purpose. Their crises become your identity. You tell yourself you stay because you care, and perhaps you do. But beneath the caring is a quiet belief that your worth is measured by how much you can fix. When someone no longer needs you, the relationship feels empty. And so you find people who always need fixing, because being needed feels safer than being chosen. The second face is the approval addict. This person, and perhaps this is you, has built their entire emotional world around someone else's validation. Every conversation is subtly designed to earn praise. Every action is filtered through the question, will they approve of this? Will this make them love me more? The approval addict is not truly present in relationships. They are performing. And the exhaustion of performing day after day without ever feeling genuinely seen is profound. The third face is the guilt keeper. This attachment is held together not by love but by obligation. You stay because leaving feels cruel. You stay because of everything they have done for you, everything you have been through together, everything that would fall apart if you walked away. Guilt is a powerful chain, and those who know how to use it, consciously or not, wield it with devastating effectiveness. The fourth face is the fantasy holder. This is perhaps the most painful of all. The fantasy holder is not attached to the person as they actually are. They are attached to the person they believe that person could become. The potential, the glimpses of beauty in the difficult moments, the version of the relationship that exists in hopeful imagination rather than lived reality. Letting go for the fantasy holder means grieving not just a person, but a dream. Recognizing which pattern you carry is not about shame. It is about clarity, because you cannot release a grip you have not yet identified. Take a moment and ask yourself honestly, Which of these faces feels familiar? Which dynamic has quietly defined the way you connect with people you love? The answer will not break you, it will free you. Chapter 3, The People Pleaser, When Kindness Becomes Self-Betrayal. There is a difference between being kind and being a people pleaser. Kindness comes from a full heart. People-pleasing comes from fear, and while they can look identical from the outside, the inner experience is entirely different. Kindness feels expansive, generous, and free. People-pleasing feels anxious, exhausting, and hollow. The people-pleaser has learned one of the most damaging lessons a human being can absorb, that their needs, their feelings, their desires do not matter as much as everyone else's. That the safest way to move through the world is to make themselves agreeable, accommodating, and endlessly available. That conflict is dangerous and disapproval is devastating. Where does this come from? Often it begins in childhood, in households where expressing needs was met with anger, withdrawal, or shame. Where love was conditional, given when you behaved, withheld when you didn't. Where being good meant being quiet, being invisible, being whatever everyone else needed you to be. The child who grows up in that environment learns to read the room like a survival strategy. They become experts at sensing other people's moods. They become skilled at anticipating needs before they are spoken. They become, in the truest sense of the word, invisible. And then they grow up, and they carry that pattern into every relationship, every workplace, every friendship. They say yes when they mean no. They apologize for taking up space. They shrink their ambitions to avoid making others uncomfortable. They swallow their truth because someone else's comfort feels more important than their own authenticity. Here is what the people pleaser never fully understands. You are not actually helping people by making yourself small. You are depriving them of the truth of who you are. You are offering a performance instead of a person. And deep down, both of you feel it. The hollow quality of a connection built on accommodation rather than authenticity. People-pleasing is also a form of control. This may be uncomfortable to hear, but when you work endlessly to manage other people's perceptions of you, when you contort yourself to ensure no one is ever displeased with you, you are attempting to control something that was never yours to control. What other people think of you is none of your business. It is their experience, shaped by their own wounds, their own history, their own lens. You cannot manage it, and the attempt to do so will cost you everything. The antidote to people-pleasing is not selfishness, it is self-respect. It is the revolutionary act of treating your own needs as worthy of consideration. It is learning to say no, not with aggression, not with guilt, but with calm, clear honesty. It is understanding that a relationship built on your constant self-betrayal is not a relationship worth keeping. Begin practicing this today. The next time you feel the pull to say yes when your body is saying no, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, am I doing this out of genuine desire or out of fear? Am I giving from fullness or from a need to be approved of? The answer will guide you, and over time as you choose yourself more and more, even in small moments, something profound begins to shift. You start to feel real again, present, alive, like yourself, and that is worth more than any approval you could ever earn. Chapter 4, Emotional Dependency, When You Cannot Imagine Life Without Them. Emotional dependency is one of the most misunderstood forms of unhealthy attachment, because it is so easy to confuse with love. When you are emotionally dependent on someone, you are not simply attached to them, you are merged with them. Their mood becomes your mood. Their approval becomes your self-worth. Their absence becomes your anxiety. Their presence, even a toxic, painful presence, becomes your only reliable source of emotional regulation. This is not love. Love expands you. Dependency contracts you. Love makes you more of yourself. Dependency makes you less. Emotional dependency often develops in relationships where your emotional needs were not consistently met early in life. When a child does not receive reliable attunement, when caregivers were emotionally unavailable, unpredictable, or dismissive, the child does not learn to regulate their own emotions effectively. They learn instead to seek regulation from others, to outsource their inner stability to whoever is closest. And this pattern, left unexamined, follows them into every significant relationship they form. The emotionally dependent person often describes their partner, friend, or family member as their entire world. They mean this as a declaration of love, but what it actually reveals is the absence of a world of their own, a life with no independent sources of joy, meaning, or identity outside of that one relationship. Here's the hardest truth about emotional dependency. The person you are dependent on cannot heal you. No matter how much they give, it will never be enough, because the wound you were trying to fill through them was created long before they arrived. They can love you beautifully. They can show up consistently. They can be everything a healthy partner should be. And still the hunger will persist, because the hunger is not for them. It is for the parts of yourself you have not yet found. Breaking free from emotional dependency is one of the most courageous things a person can do. It requires developing what therapists call a secure internal base, a relationship with yourself that is stable enough to weather uncertainty, loss, and solitude. It requires building a life that has richness, purpose, and meaning, independent of any single relationship. This does not happen overnight, but it begins with a single decision: the decision to stop outsourcing your inner life, to start developing your own opinions, your own interests, your own emotional responses, not filtered through someone else's preferences or reactions. Begin asking yourself questions you may have stopped asking. What do I actually enjoy? What do I believe, separate from what I have been told to believe? What does my body need today? What makes me feel alive, curious, peaceful? These questions are the seeds of independence. Plant them. Water them. Tend to them daily. Because a person who knows themselves, truly knows themselves, is no longer at the mercy of anyone else's presence or absence. They carry their home within them, and that kind of freedom is the foundation of every truly healthy relationship you will ever have. Chapter 5. The Guilt Trap. Why letting go feels like a crime. If there is one emotion that keeps people locked in toxic attachments longer than any other, it is guilt, not love, not hope. Guilt. The quiet, persistent voice that whispers, "Who are you to walk away? After everything they have done for you, after everything you have been through together, after everything you promised." Guilt is a powerful force. In healthy doses, it is actually a sign of conscience, evidence that you care about the impact of your actions on others. But when guilt becomes the primary reason you stay in a relationship, when it functions as a chain rather than a compass, it has crossed a line from conscience into self-imprisonment. It is important to understand where guilt-based attachment comes from. For many people, it originates in relationships where love and obligation were deeply intertwined, where you were taught, explicitly or implicitly, that leaving is betrayal, that having needs is selfish, that prioritizing yourself means you do not care. These messages, absorbed in childhood or reinforced through years of conditioning, make it feel almost immoral to choose yourself. But here is something worth sitting with. Guilt is often manufactured, not always consciously, but many people have learned, through observation, through experience, through the way relationships were modeled for them, that guilt is an effective tool for keeping others close. The guilt trip, the heavy sigh, the subtle reminder of past sacrifices, the strategic vulnerability deployed at exactly the moment you begin to pull away. These are not expressions of love. They are strategies of control, and recognizing them for what they are is not cruel. It is necessary. Ask yourself honestly, do you feel guilty for having boundaries? Do you feel guilty for saying no? Do you feel guilty for prioritizing your own well-being? If the answer is consistently yes, especially in one specific relationship, then guilt is not your conscience speaking. It is conditioning, and conditioning can be unlearned. The antidote to guilt is not indifference. It is discernment. It is learning to distinguish between the guilt that says, I have genuinely caused harm and I need to make it right. And the guilt that says, I have disappointed someone and their disappointment is being used to control me. The first requires action. The second requires boundaries. You are allowed to outgrow people. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to choose relationships that nurture you rather than deplete you. You are allowed to walk away from what hurts, not because you do not care, but precisely because you do care. About your life, about your peace, about the person you are becoming. Letting go is not a crime, it is a choice. And sometimes it is the most loving choice you can make, for yourself and for the person you are releasing. Chapter 6. The Art of Releasing, How to Actually Let Go. Understanding why you hold on is essential, but understanding alone does not set you free. At some point, the intellectual knowing must become an embodied practice. You must move from insight into action, from awareness into release. And the actual process of letting go, yes, is where most people get stuck. Because letting go is not a single dramatic moment. It is not a conversation, a deleted contact, or a period of crying followed by sudden resolution. Real letting go is a daily practice. A series of small, consistent choices to stop feeding what no longer serves you. With your energy, your attention, your hope, and your time. Here is how that practice actually works. The first step is radical acceptance. This is not about pretending you are not in pain. It is about accepting reality as it actually is, rather than as you wish it were. This person is not changing. This relationship is not evolving. This dynamic is not healthy. Accepting these truths does not mean they stop hurting. It means you stop wasting energy arguing with reality, energy that belongs to you, that could be redirected towards your own healing and growth. The second step is grief. You must let yourself grieve. Not just the person, but the dream you attached to them. The future you imagined. The version of yourself that existed inside that relationship. Grief is not weakness. It is the natural human response to loss. And if you do not allow yourself to feel it, if you bury it under busyness, distraction, or new relationships, it will simply resurface later, more powerful and more disruptive than before. Give yourself permission to feel the loss fully, and trust that grief, when you move through it rather than around it, always gives way to clarity. The third step is detachment of identity. Ask yourself, who am I without this person? Who am I when I am not performing for their approval, managing their emotions, or organizing my life around their needs? This question can feel terrifying at first, but it is also one of the most exciting questions you will ever answer, because the answer reveals you, the real you, the you that existed before this attachment took hold. And that person is worth meeting. The fourth step is redirecting your energy. Every attachment draws on your life force, your time, your mental bandwidth, your emotional capacity. When you release an attachment, that energy does not disappear. It becomes available. And what you do with it matters enormously. Invest it in yourself, in your physical health, your creative expression, your friendships, your growth. Build a life so rich and so full that there is no empty space calling for the old attachment to return. The fifth step is creating and honoring boundaries. Letting go does not always mean removing someone from your life entirely, though sometimes it does. It can also mean redefining the terms of a relationship, reducing contact, changing the nature of connection, deciding what you will and will not accept. Boundaries are not walls. They are the honest expression of what you need to feel safe and respected. Communicate them clearly. And then, this is the part most people skip, honor them yourself. Because the moment you violate your own boundaries, you teach others that they can too. The sixth step is self-compassion. Be gentle with yourself throughout this process. There will be days when you reach back for what you released. Days when you wonder if you made a mistake. Days when the old familiar pattern calls to you with a voice that sounds a great deal like comfort. In those moments, you do not need to be harsh with yourself. You simply need to remember why you started. Remember what it felt like to betray yourself. Remember what it cost to keep holding on. And then, gently, firmly, lovingly, choose yourself again. Chapter 7. Forgiveness, the final key to freedom. There is a widespread misconception about forgiveness. Many people believe it is something you offer to the person who hurt you, a gift you give them, a sentence you commute. And because of this belief, they resist it. Because why would you give a gift to someone who caused you pain? Why would you release someone from accountability when the wounds they created are still healing? But here's the truth about forgiveness that changes everything. Forgiveness is not for them. It is for you. When you hold on to resentment, anger, and bitterness towards someone, you are not punishing them. They have moved on. They are living their life, making their choices, largely unaffected by the fury you carry in your chest. The only person poisoned by that fury is you. The only person whose sleep is disrupted, whose peace is shattered, whose body tightens with tension at the mere thought of their name, is you. Resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to get sick. It does not work, and the longer you hold it, the more damage it does to the one person it was never meant to harm: yourself. This is why forgiveness is the final and most powerful key to letting go. Not because the person deserves it. Perhaps they do not. Perhaps what they did was genuinely harmful, genuinely unjust. Forgiveness does not require you to pretend otherwise. It does not require you to reconcile, to re-invite them into your life, or to minimize what happened. Forgiveness simply requires this: the willingness to release the emotional charge you have assigned to the past, to stop allowing what happened to continue stealing your present, to say, "This happened, it hurt me, and I refuse to let it define my future." Forgiveness is also deeply connected to self-forgiveness. For many people, the hardest person to forgive is themselves, for staying too long, for ignoring the warning signs, for sacrificing themselves on the altar of someone else's comfort, for choosing poorly, repeatedly, when they knew better, or thought they should have known better. But here is the compassionate truth. You made the best decisions you could with the awareness you had at the time. The patterns you followed were not failures of character. They were the logical outputs of the programming you received. You were doing what you learned to do, and now you are learning to do something different. That is not a reason for shame. That is a reason for pride. Forgive yourself for holding on so long. Forgive yourself for not knowing sooner. Forgive yourself for the ways you betrayed your own knowing in the name of keeping the peace. And then, freed from the weight of resentment and self-judgment, walk forward. Into the open space that letting go has created, into the life that is waiting for you on the other side of your release. Chapter 8. Building your own foundation. Loving yourself first. Here is a radical idea. What if the most important relationship of your life is not the one you have with a partner, a parent, or a friend, but the one you have with yourself? What if everything you have been seeking in other people, the safety, the validation, the belonging, the unconditional acceptance, was available to you all along from within? This is not a motivational platitude. This is a practical truth. Every healthy relationship you will ever have is built upon the foundation of your relationship with yourself. The boundaries you keep, the love you accept, the dynamics you tolerate, all of it flows directly from how you see yourself, how you treat yourself, and how deeply you believe you are worthy of being loved well. When you do not have this foundation, when your sense of self is fragile, dependent, and constantly seeking external confirmation, you will always be vulnerable to toxic attachment. You will always reach for people who offer even a fraction of what you need, because a fraction feels better than nothing. You will always shrink yourself to maintain connection, because connection, even painful connection, feels safer than the terrifying openness of standing alone. Building a foundation of self-love is not about becoming arrogant or self-absorbed. It is about becoming whole. It is about developing the inner resources that allow you to meet yourself with kindness, to sit with your own company without discomfort, and to trust your own judgment without constantly seeking someone else's approval. How do you begin? You begin with the small things. You keep your promises to yourself. When you say you will rest, you rest. When you say you will exercise, you exercise. When you say you will not accept a certain kind of treatment, you hold that line. Each time you honor yourself in these small moments, you are depositing into the account of your self-trust. And self-trust, over time, becomes the most stable ground you have ever stood on. You also begin by developing what can only be called an inner voice, your own clear sense of what you need, what you value, what you will and will not accept. This voice has likely been buried under years of accommodating other people's needs. You may have to dig for it. You may have to sit in silence and actually listen for it. But it is there. It has always been there, waiting for you to stop outsourcing your inner life and start inhabiting it. Practice being your own best friend. Speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you deeply love. When you make a mistake, offer yourself understanding rather than condemnation. When you are struggling, offer yourself comfort rather than criticism. When you succeed, even in the smallest way, celebrate yourself genuinely. Not for the benefit of anyone watching, just because you deserve to be celebrated. And finally, remember this: you do not need to be completely healed before you are worthy of love, your own or anyone else's. Healing is not a prerequisite for belonging. You are enough right now in this moment, exactly as you are, wounded and growing, uncertain and brave, letting go and beginning again. That is not a person who needs to earn love. That is a person who already deserves it. Chapter 9. New Connections. How to love without losing yourself. One of the great fears that haunts the journey of letting go is this: if I release my grip, if I stop holding on so tightly, if I stop being everything to everyone, will anyone stay? Will I end up alone? Will releasing toxic connections mean the end of connection altogether? This fear is understandable, but it is also based on a false premise. The premise that your old way of connecting, the overgiving, the self-abandoning, the performing, was what made you lovable. It was not. It was what made you useful. And useful and lovable are not the same thing. The connections you form on the other side of this work, when you come to relationships from a place of wholeness rather than hunger, are entirely different in quality. They are not built on need or performance or fear. They are built on genuine resonance, on the meeting of two people who are each enough on their own, choosing to share their fullness with each other. This kind of love is not something you have to earn. It is something you attract by being fully, authentically, unapologetically yourself. When you stop hiding behind accommodation and start showing up as who you actually are, you give others the opportunity to genuinely see you and genuinely choose you. Not the performance, not the people pleaser, not the version of you that contorts itself to maintain approval. You. The real, complex, imperfect, magnificent you. Healthy love allows both people to have needs, to have off days, to disagree, to disappoint, to be human, without the relationship collapsing under the weight of those imperfections. Healthy love is not conditional. It does not require you to be perpetually small, endlessly accommodating, or permanently available. It holds space for your becoming. And healthy love begins, always, 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 with the love you offer yourself. As you build new connections, bring everything you have learned, your boundaries, your self-awareness, your willingness to speak your truth even when it is uncomfortable, your knowledge that real intimacy is not created by how much you give, but by how honestly you show up. Let people see your edges as well as your softness, your limits as well as your generosity, your uncertainty as well as your strength. Because the people who are meant for you will not be frightened by your wholeness. They will be drawn to it. And the people who are not, you now have the wisdom, the courage, and the freedom to release them. Chapter 10. The freedom on the other side. What letting go actually feels like. People imagine that letting go will feel like loss, and in the beginning, it often does. There is grief. There is disorientation. There is the strange, uncomfortable spaciousness of a life no longer organized around someone else's needs. There are moments when the silence feels loud and the freedom feels frightening. But then, slowly, undeniably, powerfully, something else begins to emerge. Something that no one warned you about when they talked about the pain of releasing. Something so unexpected that at first you are almost afraid to trust it. Peace. Not the dull, resigned peace of giving up, but the deep, alive, expansive peace of finally coming home to yourself. The peace of no longer carrying what was never yours to carry. The peace of no longer twisting yourself into shapes that hurt you. The peace of waking up in the morning and belonging entirely to yourself, not to someone else's expectations, moods, or needs. This peace is not passive. It is not emptiness. It is full. Full of possibility. Full of your own voice. Full of the life you are now free to build on your own terms. You start to notice things you had forgotten. What makes you genuinely laugh? What you find interesting without anyone else's influence? What kind of relationships feel nourishing rather than depleting? What your own rhythm feels like when you are not constantly adjusting it to fit someone else's. You start to take up space again. Not aggressively, not desperately, but naturally. The way a plant grows toward light, not because it is trying, but because that is simply what a healthy, living thing does. And something extraordinary begins to happen in your relationships too. The ones that remain, recalibrated and redefined. The ones that are new, chosen rather than clung to. People respond differently to you. They feel the solidity in you now, the groundedness, the self-respect, the quiet confidence of a person who knows who they are and what they deserve. Some people will be drawn closer by this. Others, the ones who depended on your smallness for their own comfort, will quietly fall away. And you will find to your own surprise that you are okay with that. More than okay. Because every person who falls away when you become whole reveals something important. They were not connected to you. They were connected to your compliance. And compliance, unlike you, is something you can afford to lose. This is what letting go ultimately gives you. Not the absence of connection, but the presence of authentic connection. Not loneliness, but sovereignty. Not emptiness, but space. Space to breathe, to grow, to discover who you are when you are no longer defined by who you are to someone else. The art of letting go is really the art of coming home. Home to yourself. Home to your own worth. Home to the deep, unshakable knowing that you are enough. Not because someone told you so, but because you finally stopped waiting for permission to believe it. Conclusion. Begin today. You have now walked through the full landscape of letting go, from understanding why we cling to recognizing toxic patterns, from breaking free of people-pleasing to healing emotional dependency, from dismantling guilt to practicing real forgiveness, from building self-love to creating connections that honor your wholeness. This is not a quick fix. It is not a 10-day program or a simple checklist you complete and move on from. This is a lifelong practice, a daily commitment to choosing yourself, not selfishly, not at the expense of others, but alongside others. As a person who is present, whole, and real, you will not do it perfectly. You will slip back into old patterns sometimes. You will feel the pull of familiar attachments on difficult days. You will wonder, in moments of loneliness or doubt, whether holding on might have been easier. And in those moments, return to this truth. Easier is not the same as better. Comfortable is not the same as healthy. And staying, when staying requires the sacrifice of who you are, is not love. It is survival. You deserve more than survival. You deserve a life that is fully, joyfully, unapologetically yours. And the path to that life begins with the single most powerful act of self-love you will ever perform. Letting go. Start today, not perfectly, not completely, but honestly, with one small choice to honor yourself over the approval of others, with one brave moment of saying what is true instead of what is comfortable, with one gentle act of releasing what has already run its course. That is enough. That is how it begins. And once it begins, there's no going back to the smallness of who you were before. only forward into the magnificent, liberated, fully alive version of who you are becoming. Go. You are ready.